Okay, guys, so in case you've been living under a rock, we had a new commander in chief, and first day in office, he started making some massive executive orders. And one of those executive orders is a mandate to return to office for a lot of federal employees. So let's talk about it.
Back to those executive orders now and executive actions, too, signed by the president before that crowd.
One of the most important to our viewers had to do with the federal workforce. Let's listen.
Sir, the next item, as you announced in your speech, is a requirement that federal workers return to full-time in-person work immediately.
What's actually in that executive order and what it means to a lot of people here, Tracy?
Yeah, a lot of folks paying attention to this. We have more than 3 million federal workers nationwide. 15% of them work here in the D.C. region. It is our largest employer here in our region. So plenty of folks paying attention to this and waiting to see what President Trump would say about the return to the office for federal workers. Let's take a look at the executive order and what it is that it's saying exactly. Heads of all departments and agencies in the executive branch of government shall, as soon as practicable, take all necessary steps to terminate remote work agreements and require employees to return to work in person at the respective duty stations on a full-time basis, provided that the department and agency heads shall make exemptions they deem necessary. Remote workers, these are some folks who have never been in an office who are now being told that they need to return to the office if their supervisors say that that's what is necessary. One of the largest unions representing federal workers is AFGE, and they told me that over 50%, some 54% of government workers never teleworked at all, and only 10% are fully remote. Those are the folks who I was just talking about, who some of them have never worked in their offices and have always worked from remote locations. They said 80% of all hours performed are done in person.
Okay, so a lot was said there. One of the things that stuck out the most to me is the fact they said that most federal workers are already in the office anyways. But that aside, it's very real that Donald Trump wants people back in the office, and he signed a mandate or he signed an executive order. They want people back into their office. Why are they doing it? They want to make the federal government more efficient. And one of the ways they want to make it more efficient is by reducing the headcount. What's a good way to reduce the headcount without having to actually fire people? Well, get them to quit. How do you get some people to quit? Force them back into the office, and they're not going to want to come back, or they can't come back. Maybe they live in California. They're not going to come from California to DC or work in an office. Maybe they have a bunch of kids at home and they cut their childcare, and now they don't have any childcare anymore, which is a sad situation. They're not going to be able to go back into the office and leave their kids. So a lot of people are going to have to quit, unfortunately. And that's what I think the goal is here.
Earlier today, I received an email that they are ending remote work at my agency and mandating an in-work posture with full compliance by March 3rd. I don't know what that means. No details have been given as to what compliance looks like, whether that's forcing us all back to DC or finding offices in the cities that we live in. I am in a different time zone than DC. I'm a supervisor, and my team is in 3 different time zones. We have never been in DC. I personally have lived in DC when I was with a different agency, but since being at this agency, my whole department is remote, and almost half my agency is remote. There are no buildings for us in DC. They can put us on the floor. I don't know where they're putting us. And I don't know how putting us in a different agency's office just to give us a desk is a solution. The stress on my body is not helping with the IVF that we're trying to go through. I'm still in the student loan forgiveness program, so I wasn't planning to leave federal service. And I'm spiraling out of control as to what my life is going to look like in the next couple weeks because of these mandates.
Okay, so here's a prime example about how this executive order to return remote workers to the office was probably not well thought out. Now, here's the thing. Again, it depends on what the ultimate goal is. If the goal is to force people out involuntarily or without having to fire them, well, this is exactly a good example of how that would work. As she mentioned, she supervises a team of which have never been to DC. She doesn't even live in DC right now. They're in 3 different time zones. So you mean to tell me you think someone from California or the West Coast is going to start coming into DC, into the office? That's very unrealistic. So that right there is an example of how I think anyways, the underlying goal will be effective if this executive order does indeed go into sweeping effect and be carried out as they intended to be carried out. This is going to have a very, 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 negative impact on a lot of people. But such is life, right? So, I mean, we'll see. I know people personally who work in the federal government, and their agencies had already started having them come back in at least 1 day per week. And these people haven't been into the office since 2020. Yeah, 2020-ish. So what, 4 years? 4.5 years, almost 5 years. And their supervisors started having to come in 1 day a week just to prepare because they knew that Trump was coming into office. Or no, this was before he was elected. So they knew he could be coming back into office and they wanted to get them back into the habit. And so now it looks like they made the right call because now those people, they were forced to start preparing and planning for, okay, how do I set my life up to where if I have to go back into the office, I can do that so that they're not scraping and scrambling at the last minute once this executive order was signed to go back into the office like she seems to be.
A fork in the road. A fork in the road. Y'all, this thing is getting stranger and stranger. Like, okay, by the way, go ahead, you can resign free and clear. Get yourself 8 months of severance. Go find you a new job in the private sector. Don't try and find a different federal job. Duh. If you don't resign, or enough people don't resign, we still need to cut the cost. So you might get let go, and then you're going to have no severance package or any package, potentially. Show up in office. Doesn't matter if you were hired as a remote worker, a teleworker, or have a telework policy. Show up in office. Be there 5 days a week. Doesn't matter your flex scheduling or your flexibilities. Let's decrease productivity and increase cost. For what reason? So you can weed out some people? This thing is so fucking ridiculous and so confusing.
Okay, so more of the same. Like she said, now she's talking about the letter that went out to a lot of federal employees offering them a severance package. And I believe it's 8 months of a severance through August of this year. And so again, it just goes back to the idea that the federal government or that this new administration, they're trying to make the federal government's agencies more efficient. They're trying to cut people who they think aren't providing much value. They're trying to shrink the federal workforce and thus get rid of things. Well, okay, well, just say it. Get rid of people they think are not working enough or not providing much value. I just said that. So one way they're trying to do that, mandate return to office 5 days per week. Like I said, again, I'm repeating myself like a broken record. People are going to quit because of that. That's their goal. They're offering people this severance package. They're hoping people take the money and leave and they go figure it out in the private sector. That's the way to get rid of people too. If that doesn't work, well, you know what happens next? That's when they start firing people. That's when the risks come, reduction in force. And a lot of times they do it by seniority or what have you. And maybe that's why they don't want to do it that way. Because if you do it by seniority, a lot of times you might get rid of high performers that are newer or less tenured than others who have been there and just kind of coasting. So that seems to be the plan of the administration. And I mean, the overall idea isn't a bad one. A more efficient government. Who doesn't want that? You know, we all want a more efficient federal government that gets things done better. And so, I mean, that's a good thing. But obviously, there are real people that are affected by this.
Hi, Deborah D'Agostino here. I'm an attorney who represents federal employees. And one question I've been getting asked a whole lot over these last few days is what happens if I receive a notice saying that my telework or remote work is ended. And I suspect several of you are in that situation right now. So there are exemptions sort of written into the rule. So if you have a reasonable accommodation, you should be allowed to continue to telework or remote work. If you are disabled and need an accommodation, you should get one and that should be honored. If you are a military spouse, it looks like they're going to let you stay remote. And then there's another category of just compelling reasons. And this has to be a reason basically that your management chain is going to sign off on. So I think if you're given one of these orders and it's just not practical for you to go back tomorrow, what you don't want to do is be insubordinate, right? You don't want an AWOL charge. You don't want to be dealing with any sort of discipline, right? So take leave if you have to. Let your supervisor know why you can't just go in 5 days a week, or you can't move across the country without notice, or whatever your particular circumstance is. See if your agency has a process to request an exemption. Explain your compelling reason to your management. See if you can get them to agree that that is a compelling reason. But don't act like the whole thing's not happening. I mean, I know everyone kind of wants to shove their head in the sand right now and, pray for it to be 2029. But here we are. And so, You got to deal with it. You got to talk to your management. That's really your best bet.
Sounds like a bad situation. Okay, the accommodation aside, that's what it is. And I remember that happened too after COVID. Because remember, if COVID shut down the whole world and most companies went fully remote for a time, unless you did something where you just could not do remote at all. And so what happened is right after that, and things started opening back up, companies started asking people to come back into the office. No one wanted to come back in the office. You saw an uptick in the request for accommodations to telework for various reasons. All of a sudden, people had a bunch of disabilities. And so that is what it is. That aside, this whole compelling argument reason, that to me sounds real tricky. Because that to me sounds like it's ripe for, um, the word would be just unfairness. And when I say unfairness, I mean you treat one employee different than the other, and now they might have a reason to, I don't know, sue you, for lack of better words. Because Jill, you like Jill. She's a good employee. She smells nice. You want to let her do what she wants. She can continue to be a remote worker. But Joan, you don't like Joan very much. She's a mean cat lady or something. And so you say, no, your reason's not compelling enough. You have to have this stuff in writing and really, really cross your T's and dot your I's. If not, I just see this as a lawsuit waiting to happen. So this whole compelling reason thing, that goes back to the whole thing about how these executive orders get signed. And that's one thing. But then you have the implementation of it. How do you do that? What does that look like? How does each agency handle it? Is it going to be different between or among all the different agencies? That's another thing. So, but she's pretty much offering ways to combat or get around or delay this in-office return mandate or executive order. So, I mean, they're good ideas here. There's good advice. So, I mean, if you're in a situation where you're being asked to come back 5 days a week and you're a federal employee, hey, this is some good information for you. I'm just saying this sounds like a tricky situation. I'll put it that way. With that being said, let's see what happens. Again, we have till February 6th to see if people take that severance offer. And we have a little bit of time to see what happens as far as what these agencies are going to do as far as pulling people back into the office. And if you're fully remote and you've never been to DC a day in your life, I mean, part of me thinks that they're not going to force those people back, but I could be wrong. Or not back, force them to DC for the first time, but I could be wrong. We'll see. It's very interesting times. This is just another sign of things that are going to be shaken up in 2025. I mean, we're in a new administration and we're still in a tough job market, even though they say it's a good job market. So things are just very interesting to say the least. With that being said, if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you for sticking around. If you enjoyed it at all, feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe if you feel so too inclined. And until next time, make smart financial decisions.